Every Saturday morning in early May, the same quiet ritual unfolds across millions of suburban neighborhoods. You step outside with a cup of coffee in your hand and look across the lawn. A few areas are thin and patchy. The corners have started turning yellow, and those stubborn dandelions are pushing through the grass once again. Almost immediately, your mind reaches for the familiar solution. After decades of television commercials, glossy advertisements, and carefully arranged hardware store displays, you have been trained to believe that a struggling lawn means it is time to drive to the nearest garden center. You pass the rows of bedding flowers and trays of young tomato plants until you reach the towering wall of lawn fertilizer. The shelves rise high above you, packed with brightly colored bags promising impossibly thick, dark green grass that looks like a perfectly maintained golf course. You study the large numbers printed across the front, trying to decide whether a premium turf builder or weed and feed formula will finally give you the lawn you have been chasing. Then you check the prices. One bag costs $60. A slow-release formula is $55. A fertilizer mixed with weed prevention reaches $70, while specialty seasonal blends can climb to $80 or even $90. You begin doing the math. Your lawn will probably need at least 2 applications this year, perhaps 3. That alone can push the cost close to $200. Then come the additional products: lime to adjust the soil, an iron supplement to create that deep emerald color, and perhaps a soil conditioner to improve the ground. Before long, you are spending between $300 and $600 every year just to maintain one patch of green grass in front of your home. Now extend that expense across 40 or 50 years of homeownership. You could spend $15,000, $20,000, or even $30,000 on chemical lawn products for a single yard. $30,000 could buy a used truck. It could pay for a year of college tuition. It could remain as a substantial part of the savings you worked so hard to build. But while you are carrying those heavy, expensive bags from your trunk to the fertilizer spreader, there may be a quiet old-order Amish farm only 30 miles away that spends nothing on synthetic fertilizer. Their corn grows tall, their hay stands thick, and their pastures can appear greener and healthier than many carefully treated suburban lawns. So what if the real answer is not sitting on a 12-foot shelf inside a big box store? What if the key to unlocking your lawn's true potential is already sitting inside your kitchen cupboard, costs less than $2, and works by changing what happens beneath the grass, rather than simply forcing the blades to grow? My name is Elias, and today on Earthly Delights, we are going to challenge one of the biggest myths in commercial lawn care. We will look beyond the logos, polished packaging, and expensive promises. We will explore the fascinating chemistry of the soil beneath our feet and discover how one simple, inexpensive kitchen powder may accomplish what a $600 chemical lawn program often fails to achieve. But before we get into the science, let me ask you one honest question. How many bags of grass clippings did you drag to the curb last summer? 10? 20? Perhaps even more? Share that number in the comments, because by the end of this video, you may see those bags and your entire lawn in a completely different way. Section 1. The Big Green Subscription Trap. Take a close look at your most recent lawn care receipt. Branded synthetic fertilizers are one of modern marketing's greatest achievements. They are built around a business model that works brilliantly for manufacturers, but can be costly for both your soil and your wallet. The subscription trap. Apply a high-nitrogen commercial fertilizer, and the grass may surge upward almost overnight. Within 3 days, the lawn turns a deep, vivid green, giving you that immediate feeling of success. You look outside and think, this product really works. But how long does that color actually last? 4 to 6 weeks later, the rich green begins to fade. Thin patches return, and the lawn once again looks pale, tired, and hungry. The solution presented to you is always the same. Buy another bag and repeat the process. This cycle happens because many synthetic fertilizers are designed to feed the grass blades quickly without rebuilding the soil beneath them. It is much like placing your lawn on an intravenous drip. A concentrated dose of highly soluble nitrogen reaches the plant immediately, forcing fast, soft, water-heavy growth. The blades stretch faster than the plant can build strong tissue. That tender growth may look impressive for a short time, but it is often more vulnerable to fungal disease, insect damage, drought, and extreme heat. At the same time, a more serious problem can develop below the surface. When nutrients are repeatedly delivered near the top of the soil, the roots have less reason to travel deeper. Why push through compacted ground in search of moisture and minerals when another concentrated feeding arrives at the surface every few weeks? Over time, the root system may remain shallow, sometimes extending less than 2 inches into the soil. When summer heat arrives and the upper layer dries out, those roots cannot reach the moisture stored farther below. After only a week of hot, dry weather, the lawn may enter dormancy and turn into a layer of brittle brown straw. There is another concern. Many synthetic fertilizer granules contain concentrated mineral salts. As those salts dissolve, they can increase osmotic stress around roots and soil organisms, particularly when products are over-applied or the ground is already dry. The damage is usually slow and difficult to see. Season after season, repeated heavy applications can weaken the biological community that naturally cycles nutrients, breaks down organic matter, and supports healthy grass. At that point, you are no longer building a lawn capable of supporting itself. You are renting its green appearance, one application at a time, and the rent rises every year. Section 2. The rhizosphere engine and the biological ratio. To break free from this cycle, we need to look closely at the upper layer of soil beneath the grass. Healthy soil is not a lifeless material that simply holds roots upright. It is a complex, active ecosystem filled with bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, and countless other organisms. Even a small amount of healthy soil can contain an extraordinary population of microscopic life. This underground community functions as one of nature's most important nutrient processing systems. Soil organisms help decompose plant residues, cycle nitrogen, and release minerals such as phosphorus, iron, and sulfur from compounds that roots may otherwise struggle to access. But like every living workforce, these organisms need both suitable conditions and a dependable food supply. One of the most useful ways to understand that food supply is through the relationship between carbon and nitrogen, commonly called the CN ratio. Carbon provides energy. Nitrogen is needed to build proteins, enzymes, and new microbial cells. The bodies of many soil microbes contain carbon and nitrogen at a ratio of roughly 8.1 to 10.1. However, microbes consume much more carbon than they retain because a large portion is burned through respiration and daily metabolism. For that reason, organic materials with a CN ratio near 24:1 are often described as being close to a balanced microbial diet. Whenever you add organic matter to the soil, its carbon-to-nitrogen ratio strongly influences what happens next. Materials with very high ratios, such as mature wheat straw or fresh sawdust, contain abundant carbon but relatively little nitrogen. Microbes need nitrogen to process that carbon. When the material does not provide enough, they begin taking available ammonium and nitrate from the surrounding soil. This temporary process is known as nitrogen immobilization. The nitrogen has not disappeared. It has been incorporated into microbial cells. But while it remains tied up inside those organisms, less may be immediately available to the grass. If large amounts of high-carbon material are mixed into the root zone without additional nitrogen, the lawn can temporarily pale or turn yellow. The opposite can occur when the added material has a much lower CN ratio, often below about 24:1. In that situation, microbes receive more nitrogen than they need for growth. As decomposition continues, some of the excess is released into the soil in plant-available forms. This process is known as nitrogen mineralization. When carbon and nitrogen are reasonably balanced, the rhizosphere, the narrow band of soil directly influenced by the roots, can operate like a self-renewing biological engine. Grass roots release small quantities of carbon-rich compounds called root exudates. These compounds feed nearby microorganisms. In return, the organisms help transform organic matter and soil minerals into nutrients that the roots can absorb. That is the deeper secret behind a greener, more resilient lawn. The goal is not simply to purchase more plant food, it is to support the underground workforce that can cycle and unlock nutrients already present in the soil. Section 3. The true $2 hero, ammonium sulfate. This brings us to the inexpensive white powder at the center of this method. Read the ingredient list on certain commercially produced breads, or examine the supplies used in some large bakeries, and you may find a white crystalline material resembling coarse sugar or table salt. It is called ammonium sulfate, with the chemical formula NH42SO4. Food-grade ammonium sulfate is recognized by the FDA for limited use in food production under 21 CFR Section 184.1139. In baking, it may serve as a dough conditioner or yeast nutrient. It supplies nitrogen that supports yeast activity and helps the dough rise. The same compound is also widely used in agriculture as an economical source of nitrogen and sulfur. Fertilizer-grade ammonium sulfate normally carries an NPK analysis of 2100. That means the product contains approximately 21% nitrogen and about 24% sulfur. Both nutrients are important for plant growth, chlorophyll formation, enzymes, and protein production. A 50-pound bag may cost around $26 at a farm or feed supply store, although prices vary by location. When calculated at typical lawn rates, the product cost can be only a few dollars per 1,000 square feet. But its value is not limited to inexpensive nitrogen. Ammonium sulfate also has an acidifying effect as the ammonium is transformed in the soil. After application and watering, the fertilizer releases ammonium ions, written as NH4+. Nitrifying microorganisms then convert that ammonium into nitrate, NO3-, through a biological process known as nitrification. A simplified equation is 2NH4 plus 4O2, 2NO3- plus 4H plus 2H2VO. As ammonium is oxidized, hydrogen ions are released. An increase in hydrogen ion concentration lowers pH. This means repeated applications of ammonium-based fertilizer can gradually acidify the soil, particularly in the active root zone. Why does that matter? Because soil pH strongly affects nutrient availability. In lawns irrigated with alkaline water or growing over limestone-rich ground, the soil may gradually rise above a neutral pH. Once conditions become too alkaline, micronutrients such as iron, manganese, and zinc become less soluble. Those minerals may still be present in the soil, but they are held in chemical forms that roots cannot absorb efficiently. This is one reason grass can appear pale or yellow even when the soil contains plenty of iron. By gradually lowering an overly alkaline root zone toward a mildly acidic range, often around pH 6.0 to 6.8 for many turf grasses, ammonium sulfate can improve the availability of certain nutrients. As iron becomes more soluble, the grass may develop a darker, richer green without requiring repeated applications of expensive iron products. The important point is that ammonium sulfate does not magically create minerals that are absent. Its acidifying effect may help release nutrients already present, but chemically unavailable. Used carefully and guided by soil conditions, this inexpensive fertilizer can support both color and growth at a fraction of the cost of many branded lawn programs. Section 4. The salt physics and the crucial watering rule. If ammonium sulfate is inexpensive and effective, why is it not the standard choice for every homeowner? Because it is a concentrated, fast-acting fertilizer that leaves very little room for careless application. Many premium lawn products use slow-release ingredients, or coated granules, that reduce how quickly nutrients dissolve. Those coatings make the fertilizer more forgiving when distribution is slightly uneven or watering is delayed. Ammonium sulfate offers far less protection against mistakes. It has a relatively high salt index, commonly listed near 69. In practical terms, this means the crystals can create considerable osmotic pressure when concentrated around moist plant tissue or roots. Dry fertilizer salts strongly attract water. If you spread ammonium sulfate over a lawn on a warm afternoon and leave it sitting on damp grass blades, the concentrated salts can draw moisture from the plant tissue. This osmotic injury can damage cells and produce streaks or patches of yellow, straw-colored fertilizer burn. The risk becomes much greater when the product is applied too heavily, distributed unevenly, placed on drought-stressed grass, or left without irrigation. That is why the most important rule is simple. Water it in promptly and thoroughly. A commonly discussed application rate is about half a pound of ammonium sulfate per 100 square feet. Because the product contains 21% nitrogen, that amount supplies slightly more than 1 pound of actual nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. That is a substantial feeding, so the rate should always be matched to the grass species, season, soil test, local recommendations, and the total amount of nitrogen already applied during the year. Use a properly calibrated spreader with a conservative opening. It is often safer to apply half the product in one direction and the remaining half in a crossing direction. This improves coverage and reduces the risk of missed areas or heavy overlaps. With a fast-release nitrogen source, uneven application quickly becomes visible. A double pass can produce a dark green stripe, while a missed section remains pale. A severe overlap may cause burning. As soon as spreading is complete, begin irrigation. Do not leave the dry crystals sitting on the grass while you finish other work. Apply enough water to dissolve the granules, rinse them from the leaf surfaces, and move the nutrients into the upper root zone. Watering should generally begin immediately, rather than being postponed for 30 or 60 minutes on a hot or dry day. Once the fertilizer is dissolved and evenly moved into moist soil, the risk of leaf burn drops sharply, and the ammonium becomes available for root uptake and microbial nitrification. Under suitable growing conditions, a visible improvement in color may begin within several days. But the best result does not come from using the highest rate possible. It comes from accurate measurement, even distribution, appropriate timing, and immediate watering. You are not paying extra for a coating that hides application mistakes. You are replacing that protection with careful, disciplined practice. Section 5. The Carbon Catalyst. Building up soil biology. If you want to take this low-cost ammonium sulfate method to a more advanced agronomic level, the next step is to pair it with a carbon source. Ammonium sulfate dissolves very quickly. In compacted soil with weak biological activity, part of that soluble nitrogen may move below the active root zone before the grass can use it. Under certain conditions, some nitrogen can also be lost to the atmosphere. To help keep more of that nitrogen cycling near the surface, we introduce an easily available source of carbon. Two common choices are plain unsulfured blackstrap molasses and ordinary granulated sugar. Blackstrap molasses is the thick, dark syrup left after sugarcane has gone through its final stages of processing. Much of the valuable sucrose has already been removed, but the remaining liquid still contains simple carbohydrates, along with small amounts of minerals such as iron, calcium, magnesium, and potassium. The ammonium sulfate supplies nitrogen. The sugars in the molasses supply fast, accessible carbon energy to microorganisms living in the soil. A practical mixture is about 2 tablespoons of blackstrap molasses per gallon of water, or roughly 1 cup spread across 1,000 square feet. Apply it in a well-diluted form after the ammonium sulfate has been properly watered into the lawn. That available sugar can temporarily stimulate microbial activity. As bacterial populations grow, they use both carbon and nitrogen to build proteins and new cells. In this way, a portion of the soluble inorganic nitrogen may be incorporated into living microbial tissue. This creates a natural form of biological nutrient storage. Instead of all the nitrogen remaining freely dissolved in the soil solution, some becomes temporarily held inside microorganisms. As those organisms live, reproduce, die, and decompose, that nitrogen is gradually returned to the root zone in plant-available forms. It is a living, slow-release cycle rather than a coded chemical one. Active soil organisms can also support better soil structure. The compounds they produce help bind fine mineral particles into stable aggregates, creating more pore spaces for air and water. Over time, soil that was dense and compacted may become looser, more crumbly, and better able to absorb rainfall. A well-aggregated soil does not guarantee that a lawn will never suffer during drought, but it can hold water more effectively and allow roots to explore a larger volume of ground. That gives grass a stronger chance of remaining resilient when summer heat arrives. Section 6. The Baking Soda Problem. An Agronomic Warning. While discussing inexpensive kitchen powders, we also need to address one of the most misleading lawn care ideas circulating online. Search for cheap or natural lawn remedies, and you will quickly find articles and videos claiming that baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, or Nashi HCO3, is a harmless cure for weeds, fungal problems, and acidic soil. Used carelessly across a lawn, it can create far more problems than it solves. Baking soda is a sodium salt. When it dissolves, it separates into sodium ions, Na+, and bicarbonate ions, HCO3-. The sodium is the main concern. especially in clay-rich soils common across North Georgia and many parts of the eastern United States. Clay is made of extremely small, negatively charged mineral particles. In healthy soil, calcium and magnesium help hold those particles together in stable aggregates. Because calcium and magnesium carry two positive charges, they can form strong bridges between clay surfaces, while preserving pore spaces for air and water. Sodium behaves differently. It carries only one positive charge and becomes surrounded by a relatively large shell of water. When too much sodium accumulates in clay soil, it can displace calcium and magnesium from exchange sites. The clay particles then lose part of the bonding that keeps them arranged in stable crumbs. As those aggregates weaken, the fine particles disperse and settle into dense layers. Soil scientists refer to this process as dispersion or deflocculation. The result can be a surface that seals tightly after rain or irrigation. Water penetrates more slowly, runoff increases, and the root zone receives less oxygen. In severe cases, the ground becomes hard when dry, sticky when wet, and increasingly difficult for roots to explore. Baking soda is also alkaline, with a pH of about 8.3 in solution. Repeated or heavy use may push the soil toward conditions where nutrients such as iron, manganese, and phosphorus become less available to plants. The lawn may then develop yellowing even though those minerals are still present in the soil. Baking soda can dehydrate small weeds when applied directly, and bicarbonate products may sometimes suppress certain fungi on leaf surfaces. But that does not make it a suitable general treatment for the lawn's root zone. A quick surface-level result is not worth damaging the structure and chemistry of the soil beneath it. Do not broadcast baking soda across your lawn. Section 7. The fireplace method and natural partners. If a reliable soil test shows that your ground is genuinely too acidic, generally below pH 6.0, then the soil may benefit from a carefully measured liming material. One traditional closed-loop amendment used for generations on farms is clean hardwood ash from a wood stove or fireplace. During winter, homes heated with hardwood produce a steady supply of ash. Many homeowners treat it as waste, but experienced growers understand that it contains minerals once stored inside the tree. Ash from untreated hardwoods such as oak, maple, hickory, or walnut represents the mineral residue left after most of the carbon-rich material has burned away. Depending on the wood and burning conditions, hardwood ash may contain calcium compounds, potassium, phosphorus, and a range of trace minerals that the tree absorbed from the soil during its lifetime. It is also strongly alkaline, often with a pH between about 9 and 11. For that reason, it must be treated as a concentrated soil amendment rather than harmless dust. On confirmed acidic soil, a conservative application can help neutralize acidity while adding calcium and potassium. A rate sometimes discussed is approximately 10 to 15 pounds per 1,000 square feet, but the correct amount should be based on a soil test, local guidance, and the neutralizing value of the ash itself. Never apply wood ash simply because the lawn looks weak or yellow. Pale grass can result from compaction, drought, disease, poor drainage, nitrogen deficiency, excessive pH, or many other causes. Traditional jar tests using vinegar or baking soda may produce fizzing under certain conditions, but they cannot accurately measure lawn pH or determine a safe amendment rate. For a reliable decision, use an inexpensive soil pH kit or send a sample to an agricultural extension laboratory. If the soil is already neutral or alkaline, adding wood ash can create nutrient lockout and cause long-term damage. Never combine it blindly with lime, and do not use ash from painted, treated, glued, or manufactured wood. For a more natural and self-renewing source of nitrogen, one of the best lawn partners is white clover, Trifolium repens. For many years, clover has been treated as an unwanted weed in conventional lawns. But before broadleaf herbicides became common, clover was frequently included in lawn seed mixtures because it stayed green, tolerated close mowing, and contributed nitrogen to the system. Small nodules on clover roots contain symbiotic bacteria known as rhizobia. These bacteria capture nitrogen gas from the atmosphere and convert it into forms the clover can use. Most of that nitrogen initially supports the clover itself. Over time, some enters the surrounding soil as roots shed tissue, leaves decompose, and microbial communities recycle organic matter. A mixed lawn containing grass and white clover may therefore need less supplemental nitrogen than a pure grass lawn. The exact contribution varies widely with climate, soil conditions, clover coverage, mowing practices, and overall plant health. White clover also remains green through periods of moderate drought, tolerates some pet urine damage better than many grasses, and produces flowers that support bees and other pollinators. It will not suit every yard, especially where uniform turf is required, but for homeowners willing to accept a more diverse lawn, clover can reduce fertilizer dependence and strengthen the biological cycle. Section 8. Moving beyond the sterile green desert. This brings us to the final and perhaps most liberating idea. The perfectly manicured, single-species turf lawn is a relatively modern landscape. It may look neat and familiar, but it often demands constant mowing, irrigation, fertilizer, weed control, and money. As you begin rebuilding your soil and creating a more biologically active yard, a deeper question naturally appears. Does every square foot around the house truly need to be grass? Traditional homesteads and farms were usually designed to make the land useful. Areas near the home produced herbs, fruit, vegetables, eggs, shade, medicine, animal forage, or habitat for beneficial wildlife. You do not need to remove your entire lawn at once. Start with the sections that are difficult to mow, too shady for healthy turf, constantly dry, steeply sloped, or rarely used. Here are 7 productive and attractive alternatives. The backdoor kitchen herb garden replace thin or shaded grass near the kitchen entrance with raised beds or well-drained planting areas filled with rosemary, thyme, sage, chives, oregano, or mint. Many culinary herbs tolerate dry conditions once established, attract beneficial insects, and provide fresh flavor only a few steps from the kitchen. Keep spreading plants such as mint in containers or contained beds so they do not take over the yard. The small south-facing orchard. A sunny boundary can support several semi-dwarf fruit trees, such as apple, peach, pear, plum, or fig, depending on your climate. These trees provide spring flowers, summer shade, wildlife value, and fresh fruit. Choose varieties suited to your local chilling hours, disease pressure, available space, and pollination requirements. A well-planned small orchard can remain productive for decades. The pollinator haven. A steep, awkward, or difficult-to-mow section can become a planting of regionally native flowers and grasses. Species such as coneflower, milkweed, black-eyed Susan, bee balm, asters, and goldenrod can support butterflies, bees, and other beneficial insects. Once established, a native planting usually needs less irrigation and fertilizer than turf, although it still requires thoughtful preparation and early weed control. The berry hedge. Instead of relying only on a wooden or metal boundary, plant an edible hedge of blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, currants, or other berries adapted to your area. A living hedge can provide privacy, flowers for pollinators, wildlife habitat, and fruit for the household. Match each plant to the soil pH and sunlight it requires, and choose thornless varieties where people frequently walk. The side yard vegetable plot. That narrow strip beside the house may be large enough for raised beds, containers, or a simple in-ground garden. With good compost, adequate sunlight, and sensible crop selection, a small space can produce tomatoes, cucumbers, beans, peppers, leafy greens, and herbs through much of the growing season. Before planting, check how many hours of direct sunlight the area receives and make sure water drains away from the home's foundation. The chicken yard. Where local regulations allow, a small, secure chicken area can turn part of the yard into a productive system. Chickens consume selected kitchen scraps, scratch through bedding, eat many insects, and produce eggs and manure. But they also require predator-proof housing, clean water, balanced feed, shade, ventilation, and responsible manure management. They are not maintenance-free composters, but when cared for properly, they can connect household food use, fertility, and small-scale production in a practical cycle. The wildflower strip. Thin grass along a driveway, roadside, or fence can be replaced with low-growing native flowers or grasses. This softens hard landscape edges, slows and filters runoff, provides habitat, and reduces the need to mow in narrow or hazardous areas. Choose species that will not block visibility near driveways or spread aggressively into neighboring land. Every square foot of unnecessary turf that becomes a well-planned, productive ecosystem is one less area demanding constant mowing, watering, and fertilizer. The goal is not to declare grass useless. A lawn can provide space for children, pets, walking, recreation, and cooling around the home. The goal is to keep grass where it serves a purpose and allow the rest of the yard to become more diverse, resilient, and productive. Conclusion: reclaiming the invisible reward. There is a beautiful principle found in many traditional farming cultures. What we see above the ground is the visible reward for work that first happened out of sight beneath the surface. Healthy grass, vegetables, trees, and crops begin with functioning soil. When we stop focusing only on forcing quick green growth and begin improving the root zone, we move from fighting natural processes to working with them. That does not mean every synthetic fertilizer is automatically harmful, or that every kitchen product belongs on the lawn. It means we should use amendments according to soil conditions, plant needs, correct rates, and sound biological principles. You may not need a $60 bag covered in marketing promises. In the right soil, a carefully measured application of ammonium sulfate can provide affordable nitrogen and sulfur while gradually helping to lower an overly alkaline root zone. A diluted carbon source may temporarily stimulate microbial activity. A higher mowing height can shade the soil, protect growing points, and encourage stronger roots. But none of these tools replaces the most important ingredients: accurate soil testing, correct watering, proper mowing, organic matter, and patience. The next time you walk past those towering stacks of brightly colored fertilizer bags, look beyond the packaging. Ask what your soil actually needs before buying another product. Perhaps the answer is nitrogen. Perhaps it is aeration, compost, better drainage, a pH adjustment, deeper watering, or simply giving the grass more time to recover. The soil is not an empty container waiting to be filled with chemicals. It is a living, breathing system shaped by roots, minerals, water, air, fungi, bacteria, and time. Support the life and structure below the lawn, and the growth above it becomes easier to manage. Thank you for joining me today on Earthly Delights. If this changed the way you think about your yard, subscribe to the channel and share the video with a neighbor who is still carrying heavy fertilizer bags home every season. Together, we can build yards that are greener, less expensive, more productive, and healthier from the ground up. Until next time, keep your fingers in the soil and keep building the ground.